My dad destroyed the Mustang I saved for, right in front of my son on his birthday. But what Grandma did surprised everyone. What would you do if your dad grabbed a chair and smashed the car you bought for your kid right in front of him on his birthday? I saved for 2 whole years to buy my son a car for his 16th birthday. But just 5 minutes after the gift arrived, my parents demanded that the kid give up the car to my sister, simply because she needed it for work more than he did. The moment I tried to protect my son's gift, an impulsive act of rage from my dad threw our entire family into chaos. And what my grandma did next made them pay a price nobody saw coming. I'm Victor, 42 years old, and I own a small auto parts shop in suburban Detroit. The story I'm telling today happened 6 months ago, on my son Connor's 16th birthday. I got divorced 8 years ago. Since then, the two of us have been living in a small 2-bedroom apartment on Gresham Avenue, about a 20-minute drive from downtown Detroit. Connor is the thing I'm most proud of in this world. The kid's smart, gets good grades, and he's so quiet that sometimes I have to ask him 2 or 3 times before I know what's going on at school. He never asks for anything. When his classmates show off their new shoes or the latest phones, Connor stays quiet and continues with his homework. That's just who he is. Doesn't complain, doesn't demand, just puts his head down and works. I remember when he was 8, right after the divorce, his mom moved to California with her new guy. Connor asked me once if she'd come back. Just once. When I said I didn't know, he nodded and never brought it up again. That's the kind of kid he is. He processes things internally, doesn't make a fuss, just adapts and moves forward. It kills me sometimes, that quiet strength. No kid should have to be that mature that young. I left my parents' house at 18 with $200 in my pocket. Nobody helped me with a single penny. I built everything from scratch with my own 2 hands, from washing cars for hire to opening my own parts shop. It took years of 60-hour weeks, sleeping in the back of my truck some nights, eating ramen for dinner more times than I can count. But I did it. Nobody handed me anything. My parents, Raymond and Patricia, along with my sister Brittany, have been living with my grandmother Helen for the past 14 years. They lost their house because of mounting debt. 14 years without paying a dime in rent, not covering a single utility bill. But if you ask them, they'll tell you it's family privilege. Pretty funny, right? My dad's the type of guy who, when he walks into a room, the air gets thick. Hot-tempered, constantly yelling. And he's always played favorites with Brittany. Since I was little, I knew that in his eyes I'd never measure up to my sister. Brittany gets whatever she wants. But for me, it was always figure it out yourself. You're the man. The relationship between Connor and his grandparents is practically non-existent. They rarely remember their grandson's birthday. To them, Connor might as well not exist. It wasn't until last year's birthday that I realized the truth. All the love in that family flows in one direction, and it's only toward Brittany. I remember Connor's 15th birthday. We had a small cake, just the two of us in our apartment. I asked if he wanted to invite his grandparents. He looked at me with these old eyes, way too old for a 15-year-old, and said, "It's okay, Dad. They're probably busy." They weren't busy. They just didn't care. That was the moment I decided that the next birthday, his 16th, would be different. He'd get something big, something that would show him that someone in this world sees him, values him, believes in him. Last spring, Connor won first place in the Michigan State Science and Engineering competition and got accepted into the STEM program at Cass Technical High School. In that moment, I knew I had to do something to let my kid know that I'm really proud of him. Not just words, but something tangible. Something he could see and touch and know that his dad believes in him. I'd been saving for 2 years. Every extra dollar from the shop went into a separate account. No vacations, no new TV, no going out to eat. Just work and save, work and save. I wanted to give Connor something that would show him he matters, that all his hard work and quiet dedication meant something to someone. I cut every corner I could. Started bringing lunch from home instead of grabbing food near the shop. Saved about $200 a month just from that. Fixed things around the apartment myself instead of calling a handyman. Watched YouTube videos to learn how to patch drywall, fix the toilet, replace light fixtures. Saved another $150 a month there. Stopped buying new clothes. Wore the same 3 work shirts on rotation until they had holes in the armpits. Connor noticed. One time he asked why I was eating sandwiches every day. I told him I was trying to eat healthier. He didn't push it, but I saw the look in his eyes. The kid's smart. He knew, but he never said anything. Never made me feel bad about it. That's Connor. Always considerate. Always thinking about how his words might affect someone else. I chose to throw his 16th birthday party at Grandma's house because my apartment was too small, and Grandma Helen suggested it would be a good chance for my son to bond with the family. I agreed because I trusted her. I never imagined that decision would cause me to watch my father become someone I no longer recognized. The party was simple. In my grandma's backyard on Oakwood Drive, grilled meat on the charcoal grill, a few cases of soda and ice buckets for the kids, and that chocolate cake Connor loved since he was little. About 20 people showed up, mostly grandma's neighbors and a few of my son's school friends. My parents and Brittany were there too, of course, since they live right in this house. My mom gave Connor a card with a $20 bill saying some generic birthday wishes like, "Happy birthday, honey. Keep studying hard and being good." Dad just nodded once and went back to talking with the neighbors. And Brittany gave her nephew a baseball cap, still with the $12 Target price tag on it, along with a smile like she'd just given him a fortune. Connor politely thanked everyone, folded the $20, put it in his pocket, tried on the hat, and took it off. The kid wasn't sad, wasn't disappointed, wasn't anything. He was used to it. And honestly, I wasn't bothered anymore either. For the two of us, they were always like this, and we'd stopped expecting anything long ago. Throughout the whole party, I stood by the drink table, pretending to be busy with soda cans. But really, my eyes never left Connor. The kid was sitting in the corner of the yard with his two best friends, laughing softly about something. His smile wasn't that bright, showy kind, but the sort of smile from a kid who's gotten used to not expecting too much. Grandma Helen walked by, gently touched my shoulder and whispered, "Is it time yet?" I looked at my watch. 3:15. I nodded at her and pulled out my phone to text the delivery guy. About 10 minutes later, a loud engine rumbled from the top of the street. Everyone in the yard stopped talking and turned to look. A tow truck slowly pulled into the driveway, carrying the special gift I'd saved up for my son, entirely covered with a black tarp. After seeing the gift, Connor stood up, looking confused as he looked over at me. I just smiled, walked toward the tow truck that had stopped in the middle of the yard. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. 2 years of saving, everything is coming down to this moment. I climbed up, grabbed the corner of the tarp, took a deep breath, then yanked it down hard. A 2015 cherry red Ford Mustang sparkled in the afternoon sun. The glossy paint reflected the whole sky like the car had just stepped out of a dream. I turned to my son, my voice catching as I said, "Happy birthday, Connor." The kid stood frozen. His eyes went wide, looking at the car as the worker drove it down to park next to the old oak tree in the yard, then looked at me, then back at the car. I watched his face go through about 50 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, hope, fear that it might not be real. And then, finally, pure joy. A few seconds felt like hours. Then suddenly he ran toward me, threw himself into my arms, and I could feel his shoulders shaking. Connor's voice was choked up when he said to me, "Dad, is this real?" I don't know what to say. I hugged him tight, patted his back gently, and replied, "You deserve it, Connor. You deserve every bit of this and more." 2 years of ramen dinners. 2 years of wearing the same ratty clothes. 2 years of skipping the small pleasures so I could afford this one big moment. All worth it. Every single sacrifice. Worth it to feel my kid's arms around me, to hear the joy in his voice, to see him smile like that. Applause rang out across the yard. Grandma Helen stood on the porch, wiping her eyes with her hand. A few neighbors whistled. "Congratulations, Connor." He let go of me and walked toward the car like he was hypnotized. His hand touched the car body, stroking gently over the red paint like he was afraid that if he pressed too hard, everything would disappear. In that moment, seeing my son's bright smile through my own tears, I thought this was the happiest day of my life. Everything was worth it. The 60-hour weeks, the sacrifices, the ramen dinners, all of it. Just for that smile. I didn't know that just 5 minutes later, that smile would be shattered. Literally. The applause hadn't even stopped when my mom cut in. She stepped forward, hands on her hips, looked at the red Mustang, then looked at me with eyes like I'd just committed some terrible crime. Her voice was sour as vinegar when she said, "Victor, you've got all this money to buy the kid a car, but you don't think about your sister." I stood frozen for a few seconds. Not because I was surprised, but because I couldn't believe she chose this exact moment to say that. Right in front of Connor. Right in front of 20 guests. Connor was still standing next to the car. I watched the smile on my son's face slowly fade away like a candle being blown out. His hand was still on the car hood, but his fingers had gone still. The joy that had been radiating off him just seconds ago was evaporating in real time. I should have known this would happen. This is what my family does. They can't stand to see anyone happy, especially me or Connor. Every good thing that happens to us has to be torn down, minimized, redirected to Brittany somehow. It's like they wake up every morning and ask themselves, how can we make Victor feel like garbage today? Before I could respond, my dad stepped up next to Mom, like two soldiers lining up ready to attack. He looked at the car, then at me, then shook his head with that familiar contempt I'd seen for 40 years of my life. His voice was low and heavy when he spoke. Your mother's right. Connor is only 16. What does he know about driving? Brittany is 24, and she has to take the bus to work every day. She needs this car more. I felt blood rushing to my face, but tried to breathe deep, to stay calm. I looked straight into Dad's eyes and said each word clearly. This is money I earned. This is a gift I bought for my son. It has nothing to do with Brittany. My mom immediately raised her voice like I just said something incredibly offensive. You always only think about that boy. Brittany struggled for 4 years at community college to get her degree. Now she's working for pennies, taking the bus like a second-class citizen. You're her brother, and you don't know how to help your sister. I almost laughed. Brittany struggled for 4 years, graduated with a degree she's never used, and now she's waitressing at a bar 3 blocks away. Meanwhile, I work 60 hours a week raising my son alone, and somehow I'm the selfish one. Their words kept pouring out nonstop, like vultures tearing apart prey. They didn't see Connor. They didn't care that the kid was standing right there, hearing every word, witnessing every moment. And in that instant, I looked over at Connor. My son took a step back. I could see the change on his face clearly, from happy to confused to hurt. His eyes looked from Grandpa to Grandma, then to me, like he was trying to understand what was happening. But my family still wouldn't stop. Dad took another step toward me, pointing his finger straight at my face like he was scolding a bad kid. He shouted, "You're selfish. When you have money, you share it with family. Who do you think you are?" His words were like the last straw. I shot back, my voice cold as ice. Share? You and Mom have lived off Grandma for 14 years without paying a dime in rent. Brittany's 24 and still freeloading, still letting Grandma pay the utility bills. And you're standing here calling me selfish. Dad's face turned bright red. He was about to say something, but before he could open his mouth, a small voice spoke up from behind me. Connor looked at his grandparents, his voice shaky but clear when he said, "Grandpa, Grandma, today's my birthday." My mom whipped around, looked at her grandson with ice-cold eyes like Connor was a fly that had just buzzed past her face. She dropped a line like a slap right to the kid's face. "Be quiet. The adults are talking." I watched Connor flinch like he'd actually been slapped. The kid went silent, eyes looking down at the ground, shoulders shrinking. He didn't cry, didn't argue. He just took another step backward, like he wanted to disappear from this place. Around us, the guests started whispering. I heard someone murmur, "Oh my God," on his birthday. A neighbor tugged his wife's hand, signaling they should leave. The air in the yard was thick enough to choke on. Grandma Helen sat quietly on her plastic chair in the corner of the porch, watching everything. She didn't say anything, but I could see her eyes looking at her son with something that wasn't disappointment, but deeper than that, like she was waiting for something. The tense silence stretched for a few seconds. I thought everything would stop there. I thought my parents had said enough, and we could continue the party in awkward silence. I was wrong. Brittany, who'd been standing silently watching like a cat stalking prey, suddenly spoke up. She looked at the Mustang, then looked at me with a cold smile and said, "Victor, if you're really a good brother, you'll let me borrow this car. Just borrowing. That's all." As soon as the words left her mouth, Brittany acted in a way that made everything spiral out of control. She didn't say another word. She turned around and walked straight toward the Mustang parked next to the oak tree. That's when I realized my mistake. After the delivery worker drove the car down from the tow truck, I'd left the keys in the ignition, because I thought I'd let Connor sit in it and get a feel for it later. The car was parked right in the middle of the yard, front end facing the gate with a clear path leading straight out to Oakwood Drive. A perfect position to drive away at any moment, and Brittany knew it. She'd clocked it the second she saw the car. That's how her mind works. Always looking for the angle, the opportunity, the way to take what she wants. She opened the car door in a flash, slid into the driver's seat like this car had always been hers. The door locks clicked and my heart dropped to my stomach. For a second, I couldn't process what was happening. My sister was actually stealing my son's birthday present. Right in front of everyone. Right in front of Connor. The audacity was breathtaking. I rushed over, banged my hand on the window and yelled, "Brittany, open the door. This is my son's car." Brittany turned to look at me through the glass and flashed a smile with cold eyes. She spoke through the window, her voice terrifyingly calm. "You've got 12 grand. Go get another one. I need this one more. Besides, I really like this red color." Then she turned the key. The Mustang's V8 engine roared to life in the quiet afternoon like a beast that had just been awakened. My mom ran over, but not to stop her. She stood next to the car door, tapped on the window, and cheered like she was supporting her favorite team. Brittany, you're doing the right thing. Just drive off. Don't let Victor bully you. I stood frozen for a second, my brain like it had stopped working. There are things that even when you witness them with your own eyes, you still can't believe. Then, without thinking, my feet moved automatically. I ran around to the front and stood right in front of the car's hood. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. I just knew I couldn't let my sister take away what I'd saved 2 years for my son. Not today. Not like this. Some part of my brain was screaming that this was insane, that I was standing in front of a running car being driven by someone who clearly didn't care about consequences. But the rest of me didn't care. This was the line. Right here. Right now. For years, I'd let my family walk all over me. Let them criticize, undermine, take from me. I'd kept the peace, stayed quiet, been the bigger person, but they weren't taking this from Connor. Not his birthday, not his car, not his one moment of pure happiness. Brittany honked the horn loudly. The car horn's piercing sound echoed through the neighborhood. She yelled through the car window, "Victor, move! I'm not kidding." I stood still, my feet like they'd grown roots into the concrete. My eyes looked straight at my sister through the windshield. Two siblings who grew up together, now facing each other like strangers. From the corner of my eye, I saw Connor standing about 10 steps away, his body frozen, his hands clenched, opened, then clenched again. His face went pale, eyes wide, watching the scene in front of him. Connor's voice choked when he called me. "Dad." Brittany pressed the gas lightly. The car inched forward a few inches. The front bumper almost touched my knees. The whole yard screamed. Mr. Rodriguez, the neighbor who lived 3 houses down, ran over and yelled, "Lady, stop right now. Are you crazy?" His wife had pulled out her phone. I didn't know if she was calling someone or recording a video. And then I saw my son running toward me. Connor rushed through the crowd and ran to stand next to me. His shoulder touched mine, father and son standing together in front of the rumbling car. His hand was shaking. I could feel it. But his feet didn't falter. Connor's voice trembled when he said to me, "I'm standing with you, Dad." My throat tightened up. I grabbed my son's hand and squeezed it tight. His hand was ice cold, but it gripped mine really tight. In that moment, I was so proud of him I could barely breathe. This quiet kid who never makes waves, who always tries to keep the peace, who bows his head to avoid conflict. Here he was, standing up to his aunt, his grandparents, the whole toxic family dynamic. For himself, for me, for what was right. I wanted to tell him to go back, to stay safe, that I'd handle this. But I also knew that would be the wrong thing to do. Connor needed this moment. He needed to stand up. He needed to learn that sometimes you don't back down, no matter who's on the other side. Austin, Connor's best friend, also stepped forward to stand behind the two of us. The kid was a head taller than Connor, his face bright red with anger. He turned to look at Brittany and shook his head. "I can't believe this. Is she really going to do this?" My mom screamed, her voice shrill. "Connor, get out of there right now. This is adult business. You have no right to interfere." Connor didn't turn around. He stood straight, eyes looking directly at Aunt Brittany through the car window. For the first time in his life, I saw my son not bow his head to this family. Around us, everything was chaos. Several neighbors pulled out their phones to record, while others shouted to call the police, and some tried to push in and intervene. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. Brittany still sat in the car, hands still on the steering wheel, foot still lightly pressing the gas, making the engine growl threateningly. Nobody moved. Then I heard familiar footsteps. Heavy ones. Behind me. My dad was walking over. I watched my dad charge over like a storm. He grabbed my arm, yanked me hard to one side, then turned to grab Connor's shirt to drag him away from his position. He roared, "Move! Let Brittany go!" But my son and I didn't back down. Without thinking, I shoved him away hard. For the first time in my life, I did that to my father. He staggered back 2 steps, eyes wide, looking at me like he couldn't believe what had just happened. That moment was the most significant turning point of my life. The first time I directly confronted my family, I didn't do it out of anger, not out of pride. I did it because I wanted my son to see that his dad was ready to stand up and protect him, no matter who was on the other side. And right in the middle of that tense moment, Grandma Helen stood up from her plastic chair in the corner of the porch. For the first time that afternoon, she spoke up. She walked over slowly but decisively. Her voice was low and clear. "Everyone, stop. This has gone too far." My dad whipped around, his face bright red with anger. He looked at his mother and roared, "You're old. Sit down. This is our business." Grandma Helen stopped walking. She didn't say anything. She just stood there looking at her son with eyes I couldn't read. Silent. Cold. Like she was looking at a stranger. Her silence only made my dad more furious. He turned back, looked at me and Connor, who were still standing in front of the car. The rage in his eyes flared even more violently. He pointed his finger at my face and yelled, "You dare push your father! You're teaching your son to go against his grandfather." I looked straight into his eyes, my voice calmer than I expected. "I'm protecting my son's property. That's not defiance." My answer was like pouring gasoline on fire. My dad ground his teeth, turned toward the Mustang, thinking something, then stepped over and yanked hard on the door handle. The door was still locked. Brittany still sat inside, eyes wide, looking at Dad like she didn't know what to do. He banged his hand on the car window and yelled, "Open the door, Brittany! Open it now!" Brittany panicked and unlocked it. My dad jerked the car door open, grabbed her arm and pulled her out. Brittany stumbled and almost fell, screaming, "Dad, what are you doing?" I thought he'd stop there. I thought pulling Brittany out of the car would calm his anger down. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Instead of calming down, my dad stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes scanning the area like he was searching for something. Then he saw it. A gray folding metal chair was lying next to the party table, about 5 steps away. He walked over and picked up the chair. My heart stopped beating. I yelled, "Dad, stop!" My dad didn't answer. Didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. He raised the chair high and slammed it straight into the Mustang's windshield. The sound of breaking glass rang out in the afternoon, piercing and cold. Connor screamed and stepped back. I rushed over to hug my son, pulling him into my arms and shielding him from the scene. But my dad wasn't done. He raised the chair a second time and smashed it into the side window. The third time, he slammed it down on the hood. The sound of metal hitting metal rang out deafeningly. I let go of Connor and rushed to try to grab Dad's hands, but he shoved me down onto the ground. My knees hit the concrete, sharp pain shooting through. When I looked up, my dad had hit it 2 more times. The red Mustang I'd saved for 2 years was now unrecognizable. The windshield cracked completely. The side window shattered, and the hood was dented deeply with marks from the metal chair legs. Finally, my dad threw the chair to the ground. The sound of metal hitting concrete rang out like a period at the end of a sentence. He stood there, chest heaving, sweat streaming down his face. Then he turned to look at me with victorious eyes, flashed a cold smile, and said, "No more car. Let's see what you can do to me now." The whole yard went silent. The guests stood frozen, their jaws dropped, unable to believe what they just witnessed. I turned to look at Connor. My son stood there, eyes looking at the destroyed car, then at his grandfather, then down at the ground. His shoulders shook, but I knew it wasn't from fear. It was something breaking apart inside, faith in family, in the people who shared the same blood. Everything was crumbling into pieces. While everyone else still stood stunned, Grandma Helen remained in her spot, looking at her son without blinking, like she couldn't believe the truth before her eyes. Raymond stood in the middle of the yard, the smile still on his lips, like he'd just won a battle. Looking at that man in that moment, childhood memories suddenly came flooding back in my mind like an old and painful film reel. When I was 13, he threw my bicycle into the middle of the yard just because I came home 30 minutes late. I had to walk the whole way because the chain fell off, but he didn't care. I'd worked all summer helping neighbors cut grass to save up for that bike. He threw it into the street. The wheels bent and warped, and he looked at me with the same look he had now. When I was 17, he smashed the first flip phone I'd saved up my part-time job money to buy, just because Brittany, only 7 at the time, was crying and demanding that she get one too. And I wouldn't give in. And now he stood there with the same attitude. My dad always believed he could do anything in this family without anyone daring to fight back. He was the man of the house, and in his mind, that meant he had the right to destroy whatever he wanted. But this time, he was wrong. Police sirens wailed from a distance, then grew louder. That piercing sound cut through the tense atmosphere in the yard. Right then, Grandma Helen spoke, her voice strangely calm. Finally. "I've been waiting forever." My dad whipped around to look at Grandma. His face went pale in an instant. He looked at the phone in her hand, then looked toward the street where blue and red lights were flashing closer. It turned out that while Connor and I were standing in front of the car, she quietly called the police. It turned out her silence wasn't because she was weak or scared. She remained silent, letting the law take its course. My dad rushed toward her, his voice roaring. "What did you do? This is family business. Grandma Helen put her phone in her pocket, looked straight into her son's eyes with terrifying calm. She said each word clear. You just told me I'm old and to sit down and be quiet. Fine. Now watch what I can do. The police car stopped right in front of the gate. Two officers got out, their eyes quickly scanning the scene in the yard. But my dad wasn't panicked at all. He walked straight toward the two officers, his face switching to that fake, friendly look I'd seen him use 100 times. He raised his hands, his voice full of confidence. Hey, there's a misunderstanding here. Nothing serious is going on. The salt and pepper-haired officer looked around the yard, his eyes stopping at the destroyed Mustang. He asked, "Who called 911?" My grandma stepped forward, her voice calm. "I did. This man just used a chair to smash that car." My dad laughed loudly, waving his hand like he was brushing off a joke. He pointed toward Connor and me, his voice smooth. "Listen, my son and his kid blocked the front of the car. Wouldn't let my daughter drive away. I was trying to resolve a family matter. My mother's old. She doesn't understand what's happening." The officer looked at my dad, looked at the car. He walked over and carefully observed everything. He turned back and asked, "You resolve family matters by damaging other people's cars?" My dad still tried to stay calm. He replied, "This car is a gift within the family. My son bought it for his kid, but it basically belongs to the whole house." I stepped forward, pulled out my wallet, and handed the officer the car registration. I said, "The car's registered to my son, Connor Webb, 16 years old. I bought it and registered it in his name as a birthday gift. Today's his birthday." The officer looked at the paperwork, then at Connor standing trembling next to me, and finally at my dad. His expression completely changed. In that moment, my dad started losing his cool. His voice got louder. "Hey, this is internal family business. You people have no right to interfere." The salt and pepper-haired officer shook his head. "Sir, destroying other people's property is against the law, whether it's family or not, especially when it's property belonging to a minor." My mom rushed over, tears streaming down her face, her voice shrill. My husband was just angry for a moment. "Please have mercy," Grandma Helen cut in, her voice cold as ice. He hit the car 5 times. I counted. Every time was deliberate. The second officer had walked around the yard taking pictures of the car, the metal chair still lying on the ground, and the scattered glass fragments. He nodded to his partner. Now my dad started really panicking. He turned to Grandma, his voice suddenly switching to pleading. "Mom, tell them. Say you were mistaken. Please." Grandma Helen looked at her son. Her eyes didn't blink. "I worked 32 years at the shipyard, faced off with tough men every single day. I never begged anyone for anything. Don't you go begging me either." The salt and pepper-haired officer stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. His voice rang out steadily. "Raymond Webb, you're under arrest for willful destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut rang out in the yard. The sound of metal hitting metal, cold and final. My dad was led to the police car, his face white as a sheet, his eyes still looking back at Grandma with disbelief. My mom cried and ran after them all the way to the gate. Brittany stood frozen in the middle of the yard, her face empty. Grandma Helen turned to Connor and me, her voice softening. "Go home. I'll call you later." The guests left one by one in silence. Austin walked by and gently patted Connor's shoulder without saying a word. His eyes looked at his friend with understanding. That night, my dad was held at the police station on Michigan Avenue, and I sat in the living room of our small apartment, watching my son sit motionless on the couch. Connor didn't cry. He didn't say a single word the whole way home. He just sat in my old pickup truck, staring into space like some part inside him had shut off. And I knew that was scarier than tears. Because for the first time in his life, my son truly understood what his grandfather thought of him. And that truth hurt more than any broken glass. After that day, with all the clear evidence, my dad had no way to deny it. During the 2 weeks waiting for court, every time I looked at Connor sitting silently by the window, my heart clenched. The kid still went to school, still did his homework, still ate properly. But something in his eyes had changed. I never imagined that the moment I thought would make my son the happiest would become the memory that hurt him the most. However, perhaps some things can't be salvaged. Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the birthday, I stood in the Wayne County courtroom. My dad was charged with willful destruction of property with damages over $1,000, which is a felony that could carry up to 5 years in prison. His lawyer attempted to secure leniency, arguing that this was a family conflict and that he had lost control in a moment of anger. But the judge wasn't buying that story. Raymond Webb received 18 months of probation, was required to perform 200 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full damages for the car. When the judge read the sentence, my dad turned to look at me. His eyes were full of resentment, like I was the one at fault, like I was the one who had hurt him. Not a bit of remorse, not a bit of shame. My grandma didn't come to court. She'd said what needed to be told to the police, and for her, that was enough. But I had no idea that the house my family had been staying in for nearly 15 years was no longer theirs. Grandma had given them 30 days to move out. No matter how much my parents begged, cried, or blamed others, she wouldn't change her decision. I wasn't there to witness it, but I could imagine what it must have been like. With my parents' meager pension and Brittany's waitressing job, they'd struggle to find new housing, but that wasn't my problem anymore. As for me, during the months after, I tried to talk more with my son. And Connor, he was always like that, understanding in a way that broke my heart. One afternoon, father and son were sitting on the couch eating pizza when he suddenly turned to look at me. His voice was calm as he said, "Dad, when I grow up, I'll make my own money to buy a car. Don't think about that day anymore." I looked at my son, my throat tightening. Before I could say anything, Connor continued, his eyes still looking at the cooling slice of pizza. "I don't need a car. I just need you to be healthy." He didn't mention his grandparents or Aunt Brittany. He only talked about great-grandma, asked about her health, reminded her to eat well, and called her at least once every week. Maybe to Connor, Grandma Helen was the only person in this extended family who truly loved him. 3 months after the trial, Grandma Helen called me to meet her. When I walked into the empty house, she was sitting at the kitchen table. In front of her was a piece of paper. She pushed it toward me. It was a deposit receipt, a 2024 red Ford Mustang. I looked at the paper, then at her, not understanding what was happening. She said to me, "I sold the house for $165,000. I used part of it to buy a new car for the kid. This is the gift I want to give my great-grandson." I shook my head, tried to refuse, but my grandma just smiled. One of those rare smiles I seldom saw. She patted my hand gently and said, "I'm moving to Sunrise Nursing Home in Dearborn. The remaining money is enough for me to live comfortably. I've lived enough, Victor. That money is for the kid's future." I was about to say something else, but she cut me off. Her eyes softened as she looked at me. "I want Connor to know he deserves more than this. More than what this family ever gave him." When I brought Connor to see her and showed him the receipt, for the first time in 3 months, I saw my son's eyes swell up with tears. He hugged his great-grandma tight, his voice choking. "Grandma, I don't know what to say." Grandma Helen patted my son's back, gently whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "You don't need to say anything. You just need to live well. That's all I need." And my parents and Brittany, they moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Brightmoor, one of Detroit's most run-down neighborhoods. They called Grandma a crazy old woman, said she was senile, said Victor was manipulating her. They don't know what she did for Connor, and I'll never tell them. And today, 6 months after that day, my son and I have returned to our everyday lives. I still work at the parts shop. Connor continues to attend school, participating in science and engineering competitions. The kid's on track to get his driver's license to drive the red Mustang parked in our apartment complex garage. I don't know what the kid thinks every time he looks at that car, but maybe it's the most precious gift of his life. In the letter he wrote to great-grandma, the kid wrote that he would keep the car very carefully, take it with him on his future journey, and make her proud. As for my grandma, after moving to the Sunrise Nursing Home, she has had a more comfortable life. Maybe she was sad to leave the house she'd been attached to her whole life, but that strong woman proved to the entire family that love doesn't need to tolerate injustice. We visit her every week, not because of the gift, but because she's the only family my son and I have left. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.